Far beyond the edges of known human space, where most maps turned dark and silent, there existed a cold and forgotten moon, a place no traveler visited and no starship ever passed without reason. This moon held no warmth, no wind, no life. It only held silence, metal, and pain. Deep beneath its icy surface, hidden from the light of nearby stars, was a complex made of steel and shadow. Built by a cruel race known only as the Grey Order, they were creatures without feeling, without mercy, their minds sharp like knives, their purpose clear. They did not conquer for land or power, they conquered for knowledge and control, and they believed life itself was just a puzzle to break apart. Inside the deepest chamber of this cruel place lay a small figure, chained to a slab of cold glass, her skin pale and faintly glowing, her eyes large and full of sadness. Her name was Lyra, and she came from a peaceful world far away. Her people never built weapons, never fought wars. They lived in harmony with their forests, their skies, their oceans. They believed in quiet learning and gentle hearts, but none of that mattered to the Grey Order. To them, Lyra was not a person. She was a subject, an experiment, a thing to be tested again and again. She had been taken from her home months ago, dragged across stars in a cage. Her voice silenced her mind, filled with questions that no one answered. And since that day she had known nothing but pain. The scientists in the lab spoke in harsh voices. They poked her skin, they drew her blood, they pushed her body to limits she never knew existed. They injected her with chemicals, watched her cells change, measured every heartbeat, recorded every tear. Her hands trembled every time she woke, her eyes blurred by light. Too white, too sharp, her body thinner, weaker. Strange symbols burned into her arms, strange heat rising in her chest after every injection. They were trying to awaken something inside her, something ancient, something they believed was buried in her kind. But Lyra never gave up fully. Each day she watched every hallway, every code, every door lock, every sound of footsteps. She listened, she waited, she memorized. Though her body ached and her spirit cracked, her mind stayed sharp. Deep inside her, a tiny spark refused to go out. It was not anger, not revenge. It was something quieter, more powerful, a wish, a hope. Across the void, in a small human ship drifting near the edge of charted space, another story was unfolding. The ship was quiet, its crew tired after months of slow exploration, but one of them, a man named Daniel, spent most of his time watching sensors, searching for patterns others ignored. He was not a soldier or a captain. He was a technician, a fixer of broken circuits, a listener to strange signals. And one night when the others slept, he found something, a whisper, a broken signal, soft and full of static. But behind it was a voice. Not a human voice, but something else, frightened, delicate, calling for help. Daniel listened again and again, adjusting filters, reading the waves behind the noise. He heard pain, he heard fear, he heard someone trying not to give up. Something about it gripped him hard and refused to let go. When he brought it to the captain, the reply was cold. Probably a trap too far outside safe zones, not worth the risk. They said the crew had orders. The signal could wait or be ignored, but Daniel could not turn away. He looked out at the stars, at the emptiness between them, and felt something pull at him. It was not duty, it was not orders. It was something else, something inside that told him someone out there was suffering, and no one else was coming. Stood alone in the control room, hands shaking, breath fast. He knew what he was about to do would break rules, maybe even end his career. But he could not sit and wait. He programmed a small shuttle with a silent flight path, hid his launch under system updates, and slipped away from the main ship like a shadow, leaving behind only a quiet message in the log, heading out to investigate anomaly. Back soon. As the shuttle broke away from the safety of the human vessel and moved toward the unknown coordinates, Daniel stared out at the distant moon, the source of the cry, the place that had been hidden, the place where pain lived. And as he flew closer, he felt something rise in him, not fear, not regret, but something sharper. The decision had been made, the journey had begun, and whatever waited on that cold moon, he would face it, not because he was a hero, not because he wanted glory, but because someone out there had reached into the dark and he was the only one who had answered. The shuttle moved through space with steady, quiet speed, its small frame drifting between stars like a leaf on still water inside. Daniel sat with eyes fixed on the console, his hands adjusting settings, checking power levels, monitoring the signal that had drawn him from safety to danger. Every flicker on the screen, every wave of sound, every faint pulse told him that the source was still alive, still calling for help. The voice in the signal was broken. Sometimes it faded, sometimes it came back stronger. It had no clear words, but carried emotion, fear, sadness, desperation, something real, something alive, and Daniel felt it deep in his chest, as if the message had been meant only for him. Played the signal over and over, trying to filter out the noise, trying to find more behind the static, and as he listened, new pieces revealed themselves, tiny echoes of screams, mechanical sounds of machines, whirring beeps and sparks of pain mixed with breathless cries. He began to see in his mind a shape, a girl, not human, but fragile, trapped, surrounded by shadows and steel, her body trembling, her voice weak, yet still trying to speak. He imagined the walls around her cold and sharp, the lights too bright, the silence too heavy. Her fear became real in his thoughts, not just data or noise, but a living thing. And as the shuttle neared the dark moon, his heart beat faster with every second. Far beneath the surface of that moon where Daniel was heading, Lyra lay inside her chamber, her eyes closed, her chest rising slowly, her skin pale and marked with glowing scars. Her body had changed in ways she did not understand. Some days her hands sparked with heat, some nights she saw strange colors in the air. She had stopped counting, the days stopped trying to speak the language of her captors. They never listened, they only watched, measured, injected, recorded. Her memories of home were fading like clouds and wind. Her family, her forest, her songs, all slipping away, replaced by pain and silence. Yet inside her one thought never died: freedom, not escape alone, but freedom through connection, through someone who would see her as more than a subject. She had tried before to send signals, weak bursts of energy pushed through the machines around her, her voice cracked and broken, hidden within the layers of security, but someone had heard. She felt it somehow, she believed it. She had no proof, no way to know, but her heart told her that her call had touched someone, and that was enough to keep breathing, to keep hoping. Daniel landed the shuttle on the far side of the complex, hidden behind a ridge of jagged stone. The surface of the moon was silent, the sky above filled with distant stars, and a slow-moving ring of dust that circled the horizon. He put on his suit, activated the cloaking shell, and stepped onto the surface. His boots touched down without sound, his breath steady as he moved toward the only visible entrance, a hatch built into the ground with no lights, no guards, no signs. It looked like it had not been opened in years, but the scanner showed activity beneath, power flowing, sensors alive. He opened the panel, used a bypass tool from his kit, and slid the door open. Crawling into a narrow shaft that led downward, the air grew warmer. Lights flickered faintly along the walls, and soon he entered a corridor made of smooth black metal. Everything inside the structure felt wrong, too clean, too quiet, as if life itself had been stripped from the air. He moved slowly, hugging shadows, counting his steps, mapping every turn, every sound. His mind fully focused, his heart heavy with the weight of what he might find. The first room he passed was filled with glass tanks, each holding remains of creatures he could not name. Their eyes open, their limbs twisted, signs of torture and testing visible even through the thick green fluid. He turned away, his stomach tight with anger and grief. He moved on, passing labs lined with metal arms, tools of slicing, burning, measuring computers filled with alien symbols and charts of things no human had studied before. He knew this was no research station. This was a prison, a nightmare built to break and bend. Finally, he reached a room unlike the others. No lights, no guards, only a simple door with strange carvings, faint and old. He placed his hand on the panel, and it opened. With a soft hiss inside, he saw her, Lyra, curled on the floor, her body wrapped in thin silver cloth. Her hair tangled, her arms scarred, her face turned toward the wall. She did not look up. She did not move. Daniel stepped closer slowly, his voice soft. As he spoke, telling her who he was, what he came for, his words gentle, unsure, she opened her eyes and looked at him, eyes full of fear, confusion, and something deeper, something like recognition. She tried to stand, but her legs shook. She fell back, and he caught her, gently lifting her with both arms, her skin warm with strange energy, her breath shallow but steady. She did not speak, but her eyes did. Her eyes begged him not to leave, begged him to be real. He held her close, told her she was safe. Now told her they would leave together, told her he would not let them hurt her again. Alarms had not sounded yet, but he knew they would soon. He looked around the room, found a path through the back that might lead to the lower exits, with Lyra in his arms. Daniel stepped into the hallway, his heart beating like thunder, his mind clear with one goal: get her out no matter the cost. And as the shadows behind them stirred and lights above began to flash, he knew the real escape was only beginning, and time was already running out. The moment Daniel stepped into the lower corridor carrying Lyra in his arms, he felt the change in the air. Lights along the walls started to flicker, alarms still silent, but a red glow began to pulse slowly, as if the station itself was waking up from a long sleep. The halls stretched endlessly, made of smooth black metal, every corner sharp, every surface cold. Machines hung from ceilings. Sensors turned with mechanical clicks, scanners hummed faintly. Daniel moved quickly, staying close to the wall, eyes scanning every doorway, every shadow. With every step, Lyra clung tighter, her breath uneven, her strength fading, though her eyes remained open, watching, memorizing, trying to stay awake. Behind them, the chamber door sealed itself, locking their path from retreat, and Daniel knew the only way now was forward, deeper into the maze of this alien prison. He checked the small map on his wrist, a crude layout he had managed to pull from the station grid before landing. Most of it was corrupted, but one line remained marked in faded blue: a path to the surface dock, an emergency exit not used for years, but still connected to power. It was far below, near the old core systems, a long way to go with no time to waste. As they moved, Daniel spoke in whispers, not just to guide Lyra, but to calm himself, telling her stories from Earth, simple ones about oceans and trees and wind. She did not answer, but her grip tightened when he spoke about sunlight. Her face turned slightly when he mentioned rain. She had never seen these things, but the words gave her something to hold on to, something more than pain. Then the silence broke. A high mechanical screech echoed through the halls, a signal that something had been triggered. Daniel picked up his pace, his boots landing silently on the metal floor ahead. A split in the corridor. Two paths, one leading toward the labs, one toward maintenance. He chose the latter, hoping the machines would expect a prisoner to flee toward the labs, where security was stronger. As he turned left, a sudden blast shook. The wall behind a turret dropped from the ceiling and fired into empty air. He ducked into a side tunnel just in time, the blast missing by inches. Lyra cried out softly, a sound filled with panic, not from the fire, but from the memory of what came before. Daniel looked into her eyes and promised again they would leave this place. He carried her through the tight passage, lights flashing all around, steam rising from the floor doors, slamming shut in the distance. The station was alive now, aware of them, every system hunting, tracking, trying to trap them. In one room he found a panel covered in alien symbols, lines glowing faintly. He placed Lyra on the floor gently and pulled out his tools, fingers moving fast, connecting wires, redirecting power. After a moment, the panel blinked and a hidden door slid open, revealing a shaft with a narrow ladder leading down. He lifted Lyra, again cradling her carefully, and stepped into the shaft, the door closing behind them, cutting off the noise. Above the shaft was dark, narrow, filled with heat from old engines, the air heavy with dust. Every step down echoed for miles, but the alarms faded, the machines above confused by their sudden disappearance. When they reached the bottom, Daniel found a hallway lined with thick cables, old lights, broken walls, cracked from age. This part of the station had not been used in years, and for now it gave them cover. They moved through the forgotten level, passing empty rooms filled with rusted equipment, broken screens, shattered glass. Lyra began to stir, her voice soft like wind, asking where they were. Daniel answered gently, telling her they were close, that freedom waited just ahead. She tried to sit up, her body weak, but her eyes, clear again, filled with something he had not seen before, not fear, not pain, but strength, the strength of someone who had survived what others never could. As they neared the end of the lower corridor, a blast shook the ground behind them, dust falling from the ceiling walls. Vibrating footsteps echoed far away, metallic and fast. The Grey Order had found their trail. And now they were coming, not with questions or warnings, but with force machines designed to capture or kill. Daniel ran faster, carrying Lyra with arms that burned with effort, his breath heavy, his legs aching. But he did not stop, not even when the lights ahead went out, leaving them in shadow. He turned sharply into a narrow passage, found an old door marked with faded lines, pushed it open, and stepped into a chamber filled with dim blue light. At the far end, a platform with a docking ring partially active, a place meant for emergency shuttles. The final way out. He placed Lyra on a nearby bench, checked the controls, rerouted power from the backup grid systems, flickered, and came alive. But something was wrong. The launch code was incomplete, the panel missing a key input. Daniel searched the room, found a side console, and connected his system, trying to crack the missing code, while behind him, Lyra sat up, her hands trembling, her skin glowing faintly, her body reacting again to something deep inside her, the same power the aliens had tried to awaken, now rising on its own. Her fingers reached for the console next to her, her mind filling with symbols she had seen during testing. Without thinking, she entered a line of code, her breath catching. As the system responded, launch system complete. Daniel turned, saw what she had done, and stared, not in fear, but wonder. She smiled faintly, her voice soft, saying she remembered. He ran to her, lifted her again, as the platform began to move, the ship sliding into place, doors unlocking, engines warming up. Then behind them, another blast, the final door burst open, figures rushing in, tall, dark, fast, weapons ready. Lyra clutched Daniel tight, her eyes wide with fear, but also with something else, something new. The ship door opened, they stepped inside, and as Daniel reached for the close command, the chamber shook one last time. A bright flash, blinding for a second, and the screen turned red. Systems failing, engines blocked. Daniel turned to Lyra, saw her hands start to glow again, this time brighter, her breath steady, her face calm. She nodded once, and the ship lights blinked back on, the engines roared to life, the doors sealed shut, and they lifted. Off below, the station burned red with rage. Above, the stars waited, silent and endless, and between them, two souls, one human, one not, raced toward freedom. And into the unknown sky, the small ship sped away from the broken moon. Below, engines burning through the silence of space, trails of heat left behind like a scream with no voice. Daniel stood at the controls, his eyes moving from screen to screen, tracking systems, scanning for threats, checking Lyra again and again, who now rested across the co-pilot seat, her body still glowing faintly, her breathing slower, steadier, but her eyes open, watching the stars move outside the window. Neither of them spoke, the silence between them filled with questions they could not yet answer. But it was not the silence of fear or pain, it was the silence of something new being born, something fragile and uncertain, yet filled with meaning. Behind them, alarms from the station still echoed through space, messages broadcast in alien code, commands sent to distant fleets, warnings about escape, threats about punishment. The Grey Order would not let this pass easily. Daniel knew this ship was not built for war, not even built for speed, but it had power enough to get them away if they kept moving, smart and careful and quiet. He looked over to Lyra once more, saw her trying to sit up, her hands gripping the side rail, her face pale but focused. He reached to help her, but she shook her head gently, as if to say she needed to do it on her own. She pulled herself upright slowly, her fingers brushing over the buttons and lights, her mind beginning to understand the controls, not because she had used them before, but because she could feel the systems, as if the strange power inside her let her hear the machine like a whisper in her mind. Daniel watched her with quiet wonder, not asking questions, just trusting the moment. Then, without warning, the ship jolted. A sharp tremor ran through the floor. One of the back sensors flashed red, an incoming object too fast to see, then another hit, not a direct strike but close enough to rock the hull. Daniel grabbed the console, pulled up the view screen, saw a dark shape behind them, sleek and silent, a hunter ship from the gray order already on their trail, faster, stronger, armed for kill, not capture. Daniel turned to Lyra, told her to hold on, locked the controls into manual, pushed the ship into a sudden dive toward a nearby asteroid field, not large but wide enough to give cover. Sharp turns, narrow spaces, dangerous paths, perfect for someone brave or foolish enough to try. The enemy ship followed, firing blasts of energy that lit up the dark space around them. Daniel moved through the field like a thread through a needle, dodging, crashing, sliding past stone and fire, each second a question of survival, each breath a fight. Lyra closed her eyes, reached into herself, trying to find the energy again, the one that helped her open the doors, the one that burned in her blood when they escaped. She felt it now, like a spark deep underwater, far away but alive. She tried to pull it forward, but her body shook, her hands trembled. The pain returned, the power flickered and faded. She looked at Daniel, saw the sweat on his face, the fear in his eyes, the strength in his hands, and something in her heart changed. Not fear, not weakness, not the memory of what they had done to her, but something sharper. She remembered his voice in the cell, remembered his hands lifting her from the cold floor, remembered his choice to stay when all others turned away. And in that memory, she found a light brighter than the fire inside her, a light made not of energy or mutation but of connection, of courage, shared between two lives that had nothing in common except the will to protect. She stood slowly, moved toward the back of the ship, ignoring the shaking floor, ignoring the sparks flying from the walls. She opened a small panel behind the reactor where power lines connected, where core energy flowed. Her fingers hovered above the circuits. She closed her eyes and let the energy inside her rise again, not forcing it, not pushing, just letting it come like wind moving through a forest, calm and natural. A wave of heat filled the chamber. The lights blinked, the walls hummed. Daniel turned, saw her standing in the glow of golden light, her face calm, her hair moving without wind, her arms lifted toward the wires. And then the ship surged forward. Engines held, the hunter ship behind them, staggered sensors, blind systems confused. And in that moment, Daniel hit the final jump command, sending the ship into a slipstream tunnel, away from the fight, away from the gray order, away from death. When the light faded, they were alone again, flying through quiet stars. The ship damaged but alive, systems low but stable. Daniel rushed to Lyra, caught her as she collapsed, her body cold, her breath shallow but steady. She had given everything to protect them, and now she needed time to rest. He carried her to the sleep chamber, covered her with a heat wrap, adjusted the settings to heal, to calm, to let her recover. He watched her for a long time, then sat beside her, silent hands clasped together, eyes heavy but awake. He thought of Earth, thought of his team who probably believed he had gone rogue, thought of what he would say when he returned. If he returned, he thought of the Grey Order, their cold minds, their cruel machines, and he thought of Lyra, her strength, her silence, her choice to protect him when she could have escaped alone. He stood, finally walked to the front seat, looked out at the endless stars. No sign of pursuit, no sound of alarm, only space. Wide and empty ahead, and deep in that silence, something settled in him, a sense of duty, not forced, not given by command but chosen by heart. He would protect her, he would speak for her, he would stand between her and the ones who saw her as a tool. And he would make sure the galaxy heard her story. The stars outside moved slow and steady like silver rivers flowing through a sky with no end. The ship glided forward, its engines no longer screaming, its body wounded, but holding strong inside the quiet vessel. Daniel sat near the recovery chamber, watching the soft light that glowed around Lyra as she lay resting, her skin no longer burning with strange energy, but her breathing was deeper, her expression calm, her fingers no longer clenched in pain. She looked like someone finding peace in a world that had offered her nothing but fear. He sat without speaking, knowing that silence Now was not empty, it was full of meaning, full of memory, full of promise. The system clock showed hours passing. Though neither of them marked time the way others did, they had seen too much, felt too much, escaped from too much, to care about numbers. Daniel stood stretched, walked toward the front console, checked the sensors, checked the course, checked the fuel. Level still enough to reach the nearest outpost, a human colony known for trade and medical care, far from the reach of the gray. Order, far from the moon where shadows lived and screens were stored in metal walls. Messages from his own ship blinked. In waiting for response, alerts demanding answers, questions about his absence, orders calling him back, he ignored them for now, not because he was afraid, but because this story was bigger than any rule, bigger than any protocol. He had something more important now, not just a survivor, not just a witness, but proof, living, breathing proof of what the Grey Order had done. Something the world needed to see, something that could not be ignored. Once revealed, a soft sound broke his thoughts, Lyra stirring inside the chamber, her eyes opening slowly, her lips parting in a breath, her gaze moving to find him, and when she saw him there waiting, her lips curved into the smallest smile, a quiet smile not made of joy, but of relief, of trust, of something close. To thank, she tried to sit up, and he helped her gently, his hands careful, his words soft, telling her they were safe, that they were almost home, that the worst was behind them. Lyra nodded, her voice still too weak for speech, but her mind clear. She looked out the window, saw the stars and the distant glow of a system where she would no longer be a subject or a prisoner, where she would walk on ground without chains, where the sun would touch her skin without pain. For the first time, she let herself imagine a future, not one stolen or shaped by others, but one she could choose, one she could build. When they reached the outer edge of the human system, Daniel sent a secure transmission, not to his captain, not to his command, but to the central hub where truth still mattered. He uploaded everything: recordings of the lab, recordings of the experiments, signals from Lyra's cell files copied from the Grey Order's systems, every detail of the torture, every scan, every result, and attached to it a message, not long, not angry, but strong and honest, telling the story of what he had found, telling the story of what Lyra had survived, and asking one thing only: that the world see her, not as a subject, not as a test, but as a person. The reply came faster than expected. Officials, doctors, scientists, leaders, all wanting answers, all wanting interviews. Some wanted to praise him, others wanted to bury the data. But Daniel kept control. He made it clear that Lyra would speak only when ready. And until then, she would be under his protection. A guest, not a specimen, a voice, not a file. And so the world watched and waited as the ship landed on the colony platform. People gathered not to judge, but to witness, as Daniel stepped out first. And then Lyra beside him, walking slowly but upright, her eyes scanning the sky, her feet touching warm ground for the first time in what felt like 1,000 years. They took her to a place filled with green light and soft walls, doctors gentle and curious, but respectful. Daniel never left her side, watching every scan, every treatment, answering questions when she could not, speaking for her when her voice failed. Over time, her strength returned, her body healed, her mind began to open like a flower after storm. Each day she learned more about humans, their kindness, their confusion, their laughter, and she began to speak little by little, word by word, telling her story, not with rage, not with fear, but with truth. Across the system's voices began to rise against the Grey Order, calls for justice, movements for protection of those like Lyra, others who had been taken, hidden, tested, broken. The silence was ending, and it had started not with armies or weapons, but with a voice and a choice, with one signal. In the dark, and one man who chose to listening time, Lyra was offered transport to any world she wished. She was offered a new home, a new name, a new start, but she chose to stay, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because here she had something no one had ever given her before: freedom, not just of body but of spirit, and a friend who had never seen her as less than human. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the quiet colony fields, Daniel and Lyra walked together across the soft earth, Wind in their hair, stars beginning to shine above. They spoke of building a small place, a home with trees and books and music, not loud, not grand, but filled with light and laughter, a place where pain had no doors, where machines had no names, and where the past would not be forgotten, but would no longer rule the future. And as the sky turned from gold to blue to night, they walked on not as savior and saved, not as soldier and survivor, but as two souls who had found each other in the darkest place in the galaxy and lit a fire so strong that even the stars had turned to watch the end.